Good morning from a rather overcast, well, with bright sunny spells, South Wales. And well, this morning's been beautiful. It's cooler and well, we've had a lot of rising mist. It was beautiful to look out onto this morning. So, I've got my wellies on. Gives you some sort of idea of the change in the weather. It is still fairly warm, but we've got a lot of rain forecast this week and the ground's damp from a lot of rain that we've had over the last couple of days, and things are getting back to normal in terms of our weather patterns here. Okay, so I've got a lot to tell you today, just as well get on with it. So I'll take you over here and we'll look at one or two things that I've got planned. So, as the title suggested, I'm giving something up. And as you may be aware of from my recent videos, I've been trying to manage my time significantly better. And for lots of personal reasons, we're a lot more time precious than we have been in recent years. And I have to get real about how I can manage my plot and growing with a significant reduction in time. So I've been looking at all the things that I can do, and there's one very big one which it's taken me a while to think through and work out. But the bottom line is I'm going to give up everything that side of me, so everything over there. And well, a lot of soul searching, but also a bit of practical thinking about what I use this space for and the workload that it brings. Let me show you. So it won't be lost on you that the grass is quite a burden to me. And if you look at where the grass is on this plot, there's almost nothing on that side, and there's an awful lot on that side. So one of the advantages of taking a line down here is that I won't be doing the mowing and grass cutting and strimming that really impacts on my time. And my plan is to take up this last bit of grass here. I have got a small bit around the polytunnel that's coming up too. But these paths that you've seen me working on, I will complete, including this little bit over on the right. And that will mean that I've really got next to no grass to deal with, just that shelf along the top of the plot. And who knows, I might come up with a plan for that. But it is quite clayey on that edge, so moving it is not really practical. And if I did move it, I would have an issue with what happens to the trees and how I transition from the fruit garden onto the vegetable growing area. So there is a big advantage in terms of not having to deal with grass. Let's have a look at the rest of it. So of course, I've been growing squash and pumpkins for years and I love it. It's great fun and I've managed to succeed each year. But the reality of the situation is when we came to clear out the freezer, eat what was left of last year's vegetables so that we could make way for this year's vegetables, we found that we had an awful lot of pumpkin and squash in the freezer. And well, I'm just growing too much and there is no need for it. I mean, in here, as you will have seen in recent videos, there are just so many pumpkins and there's no way on this earth that we are going to eat them all. And we use a few for decoration. There's more under there. There's another two there. But in terms of eating them, well, we just don't need this many. And well, the same goes for courgettes. I think probably if we had one or maybe even two courgettes, it would be ample. So I think I can rationalize growing pumpkins, squash and courgettes very easily. And well, after we've looked around this area, I'll talk a bit about how I'm going to integrate that into the remaining growing area. This bed, well, I've grown a lot of onions in it this year, and I grew courgettes last year, and I've put some purple sprouting broccoli in there now. But again, the volume of onions that we've got is quite significant. We'll use them all. As you know, I'm very challenged by white rot, so just consolidating what onions I grow is not going to be too difficult for me, and I can get a lot of onions in some of the spaces that I will be growing in. So again, I'll show you that shortly. I don't think I'm going to miss this bed when I start to rationalize what I want to grow. The shed is a bit of a challenge. So the shed was secondhand when I bought it many years back, and it's got some parts on it that are a bit rotten. So things like this step, that piece of wood's broken, and I've clad the shed so it's got 2 layers of skin on the outside. And recently I've started to get some leaks from the roof where the felt needs replacing. So the shed's a big challenge because from a construction point of view, it's not particularly sound, but I'm going to give it a go. And I think the plan will be to take the roof off and get some large, long pieces of wood underneath it, and for 4 or 5 of the guys on the plot to help me lift it from where it is over onto this part of the plot. That's the plan. If it doesn't work, then I'll have to think again as to what I do about an area to keep the things that I use in the shed on a day-to-day basis. But that's a kernel of an idea. I will, of course, lose this wonderful apple tree, and well, it's been a great apple tree, but I do have quite a few apple trees developing nicely on the fruit garden, so it's not like I'm going to be short. And of course, oodles of pears, so there's no way that I'm short of fruit. Mrs. K was a bit anxious that we might not have the red currants that she loves to make red currant jelly from. But if you notice how this dividing line that I'm working on leaves at least 50% of this enormous bush or bushes inside the boundary of the area I'm going to work. So we'll have plenty of red currants, I'm sure. Well, you'll have noticed in my last video, I'm talking about moving all the potatoes over into that area that is really difficult because I've had so much weed growth in it over the years. So no problem here. This is all going to uplift and head over there. And I won't really miss the black currants because I've gone multiple years without any volume of fruit. They're so old, those bushes, that they're almost like they've spent and we're not getting production, and I've tried all sorts of things to improve them. So not really going to miss those. The cage that I had hens in will come over with me onto the other side, and I'll show you what I'm planning in terms of positioning. But I figure if I take the roof off of that, it'll make a superb fruit cage. And I'm thinking I could grow something that's perhaps a little bit more, well, prone to being attacked by the birds, something like blueberries maybe. So I'll make really good use of that. And the jostaberries, again, they're very prolific bushes, but I've not had fruit on them now for 2 years, and I think it's because the blackbirds and the various birds on the plot strip them, but it's not been productive. So no great loss, as is the case from my 4 brambly trees, which you've seen me work with year on year now. And I think this year again, I've got 4 apples if I'm lucky. I would miss my plum tree, which has been fantastic this year. So I'm thinking I'm going to move it, or at least try and move it. When it gets to the right time, I'm going to uplift it and put it into the fruit garden where I've got a tree that's struggling. So that's a bit of a saving of one of the plants from this area. The hugelkultur bed has been a bit of fun. And well, it's not really an area that I see as productive in terms of producing food for us. I will recover the surround because effectively it's a small raised bed, and I have to work out quite how I'm going to handle that. Which brings me on to my compost area, which is fabulous. It's been absolutely brilliant being able to come along here with a wheelbarrow and offload into the various bays has been fantastic. So this is going to be a miss, but I figure I'm going to have 1, 2, 3 all-weather sides that I can couple up to 2 more that I've got there and have at least 2 big bays of compost on an ongoing basis. I may have to think about a third because of the volume of compost that I get, but there's no reason why this can't be rehoused. So I'm going to move all this compost shortly anyway, because it goes on the beds, and that'll be a fine time to work out when to move the bays and set them up in the new area. And again, I'll show you what I'm thinking, early days, but show you what I'm thinking over on the other side. So I've already told the people who control the allotments that I'm going to give all this up, and I've paid my allotment fees right the way through to March. So I've got the whole of the winter to move and consolidate, downsize if you like. And I gotta say, I'm quite excited about it. So there'll be an awful lot going on, which will be fun to see me downsize, I'm sure. And things will go right and things will go wrong. But that's the way it is with allotments. Okay. So when you look at the area I'm giving up and you just think about what I get from it in terms of produce, a little bit from that strip that I made, not very much here, apples of course, this bed a fair amount, over the back here not a great deal from the apple trees, great plums this year, and hopefully I can continue that. But it's an awfully big space with a lot of ongoing maintenance for very little return. Hence, in the end, it wasn't a difficult decision to say, give up this half of my allotment. I know a lot of you will be thinking, what is he going to do about the hens? And it's a tough decision, but I've made the decision we're not going to keep hens. We've only got very few left, and we'll keep them going and see how we do as we approach March. But at the end of the day, it's got to go, and I'll be looking out for someone who I can trust with the remaining years of the couple of hens that we've got left. And I don't think I'll have any problem with that. But the coop, which is a massive construction, will have to come down, as will all the constructions, the shed and all the pavers that I've got around the plot. I'm going to utilize over in the area that I'm working on. And I counted them the other day, and in total there's 57. So I've got an awful lot of moving of paving stones that I can use in the remaining plot area, and I'll give you an idea what I'm going to do with those. First thoughts anyway. So my pond, which I laboured over, is going to fall outside my territory. I'm not going to move it, I'm going to leave it. I'm pleased to say that already a neighbour has committed to taking the area that I've got the squash bed. I'm not sure how far they're coming, but I can't see anybody moving all that out to use it for growing space. So I'm hopeful that it will remain as a natural area that will service this part of the plots with hopefully frogs, newts and various wildlife. I did notice this morning, how fantastic is this? There is another flower coming up on this little lily. Beautiful. Take that bit of grass out. So whether that'll flower in time before it gets too cold here, I don't know. We'll see. So there's an awful lot of stuff to move here, and I'll be regenerating everything or reusing everything I possibly can. So all this membrane that's on the top of the squashes, it will all be utilised on the other side of the plot, as will all the membrane that's down there underneath the potatoes. Okay, so what about what I'm thinking over here? Let me take you around and I'll tell you my thought process. Over the years, many people have said, what an enormous plot you've got. And they ask me what size it is, and I tell them, and it is massive. And what will remain is still very sizable. I mean, effectively it's, well, compared to some plots I see, it's still sort of 2 to 3 plots. It's still a very big area. But of course, all this is dedicated to fruit and it's very low maintenance. I might get time to do things like sort out this edge, which is encroaching onto the membrane area. Who knows? And well, I showed you that I'm going to move the plum tree. And if you look in here, you can see that this apple tree is really struggling. So maybe that's a site for it. This was always planned to be a fruit tree area, and yeah, there's no reason why it won't succeed and provide us plenty of fruit. Okay, let's get down onto the main vegetable growing area and I'll tell you what I'm thinking. Well, Mrs. K and I spent some time over here thinking about what we grow, how much space it takes, and more importantly, what we give away, because we give away a shed load of vegetables because we just don't need the volume that we grow. We fill the freezer. We're getting towards the sort of middle of September now, and the freezer's absolutely jam-packed. So we can definitely rationalize what we grow from the point of view of the surplus that we have. And what I've got to think about carefully, and have been, is what I can grow in these spaces of the vegetables that we eat consistently and store in our freezer and garage, and just really refine growing what we eat. And I'm sure there'll still be some surplus, but that's what the approach has been in terms of how I would utilize this space. But I've got to get the footprint of the shed and the cage over here. So I'm thinking that it can go right here. Let me show you. Well, I've got to be really practical about how far that shed will move. I can't see us sort of rotating it around the plot very much, but I think if we can uplift it and bring it this way, having measured it roughly, the shed would sit in the same orientation all the way along this plot, this part of the plot, with the cage on the back. And it's an opportunity for me to capture water in a way that I've not managed to really before, by really rationalizing this walkway and putting barrels alongside the roof and That will enable me to get all the runoff into the barrels, and even have the barrels on the other side to get the runoff from those barrels. And that would make very good use of this space. It is a growing space. I've treated it well over the years, but I've got to be quite rational about the footprint of the shed and where else it could go. And well, I could put it all along there, but I think it's going to be on a really substantial slope unless I raised it, and probably very difficult to move down there. And I'm thinking that this is a really good site for putting all those potatoes and getting a covering over here. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking of doing at the moment. Who knows? I'm gonna have to wait for the leeks to be used so that I can get it in easily without too much dodging around vegetables. So it's going to be something that happens considerably later on. And of course I've got to empty that shed, and I'm thinking storage of pots and various bits and bobs. Well, the only solution really for the winter months is the polytunnel. So whilst Danny was here, I was sort of quizzing him what he would do and bouncing ideas. And we were looking at where to put the compost bins, and my initial thought was down here. And I could put probably 3 together here somewhere, either at the other end or this end. And well, Danny said you get runoff from the compost, so if you have it higher up this patch, then the runoff, which is good stuff for fertilizing crops, would come down. I think that makes an awful lot of sense. So at the moment I'm thinking shed with cage and barrels and all of the compost bins alongside it, which would dedicate half of this square to the functional part of the allotment and growing veg. Down here I could probably turn around my storage container so that it's long ways in line with that telephone post. It will face out into the potato area and then uplift that IBC tank, which has always been difficult to access, and put it adjacent to the other one, which will probably make things a lot more simple and serviceable in terms of water. And this is where I've got 2 of those plastic pallets which I'll use to make up the full set of compost bins. So on that basis, my beans could stay exactly where they are, and I could continue to grow parsnip in this deeper part of this square bed. So that all works for me, which brings me on to all the individual beds and how I would use those. So I've got 8 raised beds here and another 2 at the bottom. And we sort of went through this rationalizing what we use and how we use it. So I've got 2 beds of celeriac, which I really don't need. We do love celeriac, or at least I do. Mrs. K, not so keen, but I could grow, what, there's 10 celeriac in there. I don't really need to use 2 beds, and I can give them a lot of attention in the one. We've got a mixed bed here. I did half a bed of beetroot, but then ended up putting bits and bobs that were left over in the other half because I didn't really have anything that we eat that I wanted to put in there. So there's a bed full there of, let's call it celeriac, let's say half a bed of beetroot, because that's what we tend to use. And then down here I've got the broccoli, which for a long time I didn't even know what I was growing because I couldn't identify it, as you know. But the reality is, even that broccoli, as fantastic as it looks, produces just that small head. And well, I could probably grow 4 of those. I'd be quite happy. And then I've got 1 large bed with Caballero Nero style cow. 2 plants would probably feed us, and in there is 8. We give an awful lot away. So I reckon I could get the kale we need and the cabbage that we tend to eat in 1, maybe 2 beds, and I've actually got 4 dedicated to it here. So really way more than we need, and we give so much of it away. And then swede, we'll definitely use all the swede I've grown there because we make so many meals with swede, so that'll be good. And we've got multiple beds left then for onions. I can bring leeks over here. The reality of it is that there's oodles of room in this space when you really get tough about what you use, what you store, and what you need to eat. So it turned out to be not as big a decision as I thought it would be in terms of rationalising the veg that we grow. And I'm looking forward to having more consolidated spaces where the vegetable is really important and I can focus my time and attention on it without spending hours and hours doing all the maintenance of what is a massive plot. So it's a real downsize, but at the same time, that's a really good feeling about being efficient and eating what we grow. And of course, when I get everything out of the polytunnel, then I've got the opportunity to grow in the polytunnel. Okay, so, well, I've talked an awful lot, and a lot of that is plans that I've been developing over the last weeks. And many of you have heard me talking about rationalizing what I'm doing, and that's where I was leading. But those plans, they're pretty malleable. They might change. I might end up putting the shed somewhere else. But you've got to start somewhere with what you think you're going to do. So, well, what I'm thinking is maybe this area down here can be paving stones. And I'm definitely thinking run a line of pavers all the way down the side of the plot. So there's a clear delineation between what I'm working and whoever takes over this plot over here. And the other thought is that I need to stop the ingress of the grass, and if I make a clear hard barrier, then that will help. You can see how this is breaking down. It's actually just hanging on, and we've also got all the way down quite a lot of growth into the bed from the grass area. So in the interest of driving my relatively maintenance-free area, I want to try and stop that weed ingress. So I think that will take a fair old amount of pavers all the way down there. I haven't counted it, but I reckon it'll be almost all the pavers that I've got. So it'll look very different, but it'll also be, well, a barrier from stopping an awful lot of extra work. You can see here how the grass is growing into the bed from this area too. So the water containers, well, they need attention anyway. The ones that have got wooden pallets, you can see that it's on an angle as it's breaking down slowly. So it's time to sort of strip this whole area out and set up 2 tanks together near the polytunnel, raised and level. That'll mean taking out my cold frame, which with my approach to growing this year I've not used, because I've not taken plants from the house and brought them out and nurtured them before growing them on. The top window part of the cold frame broke, and because I haven't been using it in the same way, I haven't spent the time repairing it. But I'm thinking that that whole cold frame can come out and be a raised bed. So I've got a raised bed that comes from the hugelkultur bed, and I've got a raised bed that will come from the cold frame. And I don't have a site for them yet, but I'm convinced it won't be difficult to decide where to put them. And it may well be that I just raise the soil levels down on the bottom end of the square, or I might find somewhere else to put them. The jury's out really. There's plenty of small spaces where I could make good use of them, and the beauty is they won't be surrounded by grass, so they should be very productive. And when you think about the overall productivity I can get out of this area, it really brings home that that area over there was just a very high maintenance sort of part of my plot. And I'm hoping that somebody will take it over and make really good use of the space. That's a long way down the road yet. A little bit of exercise. That's got that path really quite level. There's a few dips and crevices, and of course I've got to take these retaining strips up, which I used to keep the wood chip in the other area. So each one of these walkways has got a little piece of wood I can take out, and then I'm thinking that when I put the membrane on top, I just need to tuck it under. So I'll pull back the wood chip and lift the membrane, tuck some more membrane under, and then that should stop this weed growth that I get at the edge, which is quite difficult to take out. So I'll get that out when I move those. So that's that one done, and I just have to work my way up there on another day. I think it won't take much to level that, that's for sure. But yeah, it's looking good. Right, Mrs. K's put an order for some beans. She says she wants half an hour of beans, and I have to sort of translate that from what do I pick to what will it take her half an hour to prepare. I'm reasonably good at that. We'll see. There we are. That's, well, 25 minutes worth of beans. I finished one side, thought I wouldn't touch the other, so I've shortchanged her by 5 minutes. But there's some beautiful beans. Look at those. Fantastic. The beans took a long time to work themselves out with all the hot weather, but they came good in the end. Well, I do hope you've enjoyed today's video, and well, lots of plans, so it should be interesting. And if you like my videos, then why not like and subscribe and get my updates every Wednesday and Sunday at 8 PM. Hope you had a good week. Good times.